I'll speak first and then pass to Sinomar and then who is online. Thank you all for being here. How many of you participated in the first GIA project? Okay, and online, well, I can't see you. I know that we have some great participants online too. That Carol was one of our partners in the first effort. But, okay, so what I want to do today is just talk to you a little bit about where we've come from and what we accomplished in the GIA project, which was a 3-year effort funded by the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation to form a learning community between the UF TCD program and partners in various countries of the Amazon region. We have a website that will show you how we organize this learning community over this 3-year period. We also, within that website, have a series of products. So we brought organizations together to learn from each other, and we produced academic and community-oriented products for different regions, different topics related to governance and infrastructure in the Amazon. And, okay, so I just want to show you, this is a diagram of the network that we formed with various regional and thematic working groups. So each red ball here is a pole in the network, and each circle is an NGO, black if they're from Brazil, green if from Bolivia, from Colombia, from Peru, and then the triangles are grassroots organizations, and the few squares we have here are universities from the different regions. And we had a group in Brazil focusing on legal action related to infrastructure governance. We have a group in Colombia that was very strong in terms of intercultural collaboration. In the Upper Madeira region, mostly in Bolivia, but in the frontier with Brazil, we had a lot of integration between university knowledge generation and local communities. And we had a Pan-Amazon group with 14 participants on strategic communications that brought people from all of these. And we had a series of activities within regions, between regions, produced all those products. And how we did that, this is a diagram of the UF team that worked together over this 3-year period to coordinate those regional and thematic working groups. And here we have all of the different, on the blue outer circles are the sub-teams that we mixed and matched between a group that is in the interior part here of students, the coordinators, Andrea and myself, postdocs, and faculty. So we all work together and on the different themes of the regions and of the elements of infrastructure governance, as well as workshop facilitation. We produced case studies, we did stakeholder analysis, we focused on intercultural collaboration. So we had teams working on all of these things. And I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for what a unique educational experience this is for especially these students, but it's a great horizontal structure because we're all learning from each other, and these students bring in and then go back to the Loreto region of the Amazon or Brazil's National Development Bank, NGOs in Brazil, and they're learning together. They're interacting with practitioners. So all of these working groups are ways that they're interacting with practitioners. So it's a really fantastic educational opportunity. I think you get in the other university in the world. So I think we should really appreciate that. Okay, and so some of the main findings, well, one thing was that the key actors in terms of success in influencing infrastructure governance were grassroots organizations, recognizing that they always work in partnership with NGOs and universities, but statistically, based on an analysis of 55 cases, the strategies that were led by grassroots organizations were about twice as likely to have medium or high success in terms of infrastructure governance. So they're really key actors, and the key strategies are a suite of things related to political action and negotiation. That includes communications, it includes direct action, and it kind of makes sense that the most successful actors are the ones who are the most directly affected and most willing to then go far to confront infrastructure governance that was having a negative impact on them. We also found that in our learning network, these grassroots organizations were very engaged. So the partners from NGOs and universities participated, but these organizations really integrated our work with their programs, and they formed a community among themselves. And a final finding from the final workshop was that the importance of power relations among allies. We know that power relations between state socioeconomic actors and proponents of infrastructure are fraught, but also the power relations between allies, and especially the grassroots organizations, were very articulate and forceful about the way they want to interact with partners and not be seen as beneficiaries, or that they want to have their knowledge recognized, and so on. So unfortunately, in the world of projects end, and after 3 years, we kind of have a gap between this larger network. But what we did to kind of think together with these partners for a second version of GIA, which is where we are now, is we formed a working group of especially the grassroots partners and a few NGOs who work very closely with the NGOs. So this is the broader diagram of the GIA participants, and these are the organizations that we convened in a steering committee to work together to design a new phase of the GIA project. And what they told us was, we don't want to just design a new project for the University of Florida and help you develop your project. We want to design a project for ourselves and that we want to implement. And also we want to get funding for ourselves to implement this project directly. So that's what they told us. And we then had a course last spring semester. We organized a virtual conference for the Latin American program here in February called Voices from the Forest. And together with them, we met before this conference, at the conference, and after the conference. We continue to work with the steering committee to develop a proposal that they have submitted to the Bezos and Ford Foundations for direct funding for them. And that is an ongoing process. And then we wrote a pre-proposal to the Moore Foundation for continuity of our role in supporting this process that they are leading. Okay, so I'm going to see if this will work here. Just show you this video that our student in the course produced from the conference, and it really presents, from the perspective of our partners, the theory of change for biocultural conservation. Hearing it.
Maybe it's muted here. Let me check.
Pardon me?
Oh, it is here.
Now here it's muted.
Of indigenous tradition communities with
Can you go back to the beginning?
conservation.
It's a student product.
The Science Panel for the Amazon documents that conservation of tropical forests and rivers is essential to addressing global challenges of climate, biodiversity, social and environmental justice, and that solution space includes biocultural conservation, integrating the well-being of indigenous and traditional communities with conservation, thus calling for actions in the areas of rights and governance, social bioeconomy linked to territorial management and organizational capacity to protect these areas and address these global challenges.
Biodiversidad está en los territorios indígenas y que nosotros venimos defendiendo con todo lo que podemos hasta ahora. Entonces, ya se avanza en un proceso de exigir juntos, en una manera, los derechos. Y mucho se ha marchado en Bolivia hasta llegar a la constitución política del Estado, a un Estado plurinacional en el 2009. Lo que necesitamos es apoyo para poner en práctica toda esa visión de planes de vida que tenemos, que incluye toda forma de vida, no solamente nuestra vida.
La participación política de los pueblos indígenas y el reconocimiento de la democracia comunitaria no se constituye en un proyecto de integración del sistema jurídico estatal, sino el enriquecimiento de la vida democrática nacional en el marco del pluralismo y la diversidad política, intensificando la participación social en la toma de decisiones a través de múltiples formas de deliberación, toma de decisiones, gestión y veeduría. Surge la necesidad imperiosa de contar con un observatorio de derechos humanos de los pueblos indígenas especializados en aspectos jurídicos, cuyos objetivos serían de la promoción y defensa de los derechos humanos de los pueblos indígenas y de la naturaleza.
Específicamente nosotros los CINDAS lideramos todo un módulo organizativo de educación, entendiendo que la selva, el bosque, somos también nosotros, estamos también inmersos, pues estamos en esa visión, en ese pensamiento de seguir fortaleciendo las capacidades, de seguir empoderando esa visión de territorio, de seguir posicionando y de seguir empoderando en la nueva generación ese sentido, esa importancia, ese compromiso y esa responsabilidad de seguir cuidando y protegiendo nuestra Amazonía.
El valor de la economía en nuestros territorios tiene otro concepto de integralidad. Es de reconocer que el trabajo que ha hecho por generaciones muchas de nuestras poblaciones indígenas en la Amazonía como en el mundo es la creación de métodos más eficaces para satisfacer las necesidades humanas y fundamentales en la articulación armónica con la naturaleza de una manera integral. Por un lado no es la naturaleza y por el otro lado la cultura y por el otro lado el hombre. Nosotros vemos todo el mundo con una cosmovisión integral.
Es muy importante que sea tomada en cuenta estas dos cosas. Queremos aplicar las energías limpias, las energías renovables en las comunidades, aparte de que le va a dar un mejor estilo de vida. Aparte de eso van a proteger los bosques. Y dentro del área urbana nosotros estamos siempre con ese apoyo con el tema de la agrovida o huertos ecológicos, producción de alimentos naturales, no sin usar agroquímicos que también van destruyendo nuestra naturaleza. Esperemos esto que nosotros estamos hoy día enfocando, podamos aplicarla más adelante a través de GIA.
A proteção da floresta seja só uma obrigação dos povos indígenas, porque a floresta é a vida de todo mundo. Então, essa obrigação não deveria estar só nos povos indígenas. Então, eu acho que quando a gente dá voz para os povos indígenas, a gente pode transmitir, né, esse conhecimento que a gente tem de proteger a floresta e por que proteger a floresta.
So from that statement of biocultural conservation, we produced a project. And now we're going to continue working on that concept each day.
What is the, it's here. Need to open it again, I guess.
See here.
This one, right? There you go. Oops.
Okay.
There.
Yeah.
Ay, no. That is.
So, okay. Basically, talking about the concept, we try to just put some input from the group and even for during the conference. And after that, like, try to say something that we agree about the concept and try to bring here some lacking. So we have, I think, deep discussion and understanding around the biocultural conservation. And I'm putting here this concept that is pragmatic. meaning which could be seen to support their life plans, so their governance and territorial needs, or their means of life, and of course their well-being. So it's a concept can have more practical meaning, you know, rooted in local actions from traditional groups to protect nature and territories worldwide. So it has political meaning to provide pluralism and political freedom and multiple ways for participating and debating traditional people power and voices. So self-determination and local autonomy. And even for like Somakause or Buenvivir, that is recognizing the nature rights, you know, and the relations of the traditional peoples, the state, and nature. So and even we have like a deep meaning, I would say new knowledge, epistemological way, when they try to combine like community, culture, and preservation. So basically they talk about like social bioeconomy, and each one of these words mean to them something, and even more empirical way from them. But also they talk like philosophically about the topic. So we don't have here Waida's voice, but she like went to it and discussed in an interesting way. So, however, so we agree, yeah, about the concept. It's a bottom-up approach for asking respect for the plurality of ethnical groups and the means for improving of life and well-being, for example, in the Amazon. But of course, the studies say about the world, no, about this concept. So we agree the concept is distinct for seeking good or best practice, social and culturally grounded, that encompass the local knowledge, needs and values, and the traditional ecology knowledge. So, and we agree on the good faith practice to the harmonious integrations of nature. So, and that's we need like interdisciplinarity, we need like the transdisciplinarity, and innovative ways and approach is required for the topic. So, and we integrate to multi-scale topics to maintain sustainability. Then bridging different knowledge to increase resilience for the ecosystem and biodiversity. But the concept is lacking. So understand what are local metrics and indicators. So this author talks a lot about the interactions about well-being and sustainability, and straightforward she's saying about that. So, and the concept is like, what are the best ways and practice? So to integrate traditional knowledge to technical and scientific approach. So, and for sure, researchers can do better to set up conditions which foster mutually profitable knowledge exchange, build on actions better prepared and planned. So, and finally, so using how biocultural values and indicators focus on effective and more equitable conservation for specific ecosystems, for example, the Amazon. So, and it can foster solutions grounded on local capacities and help the resilience of those that are protecting their territory, biodiversity, and ecosystem. So I'll pass to Andrea now to talk about the theory of.
Thank you, Sinomar, and thank you, Bob, for giving first the introduction about GIA and now about this, I would say, new fancy word on biocultural conservation. And yes, kind of like we would like to give you now in the next slides a little bit kind of like where we stand in terms of a new grant that we, a small grant, I would say, that we just recently got awarded. And I would say that it's as well a great opportunity to continue thinking and reflecting and producing guidelines and even publications about biocultural conservation. And I would like kind of now refer to this infographic that was created by Carol de Giordano, who is here in this call as well, but it was co-produced and co-developed with partners in 2022, the ones that were part of the video that you just saw. And I think this is essential for us right now because it captures what partners, the forest dwellers, right, envision themselves and as well what type of guarantees they want in terms of the rights and the proper management of their own indigenous territories and local territories, how to guarantee the self-determination and consultations of their territories, and how to have more autonomy or have the autonomy that they need and the security as well. And this with specific actions that you see on your left, stemming from topics of rights and governance and capacities and socio-bioeconomy and territorial management that would ultimately lead to, now you can look into to your right, to the impacts, or to better impacts for solutions to the challenges of climate change, climate variability, biodiversity, and socio-environmental justice. So as you kind of like can grasp with our presentation, this is a very bottom-up approach. And we know that there are limiting factors that play a role, kind of like the power structures that we mentioned at the beginning as well, and some other enabling factors. This all plays a role. And yes, and we know that this kind of like it's right now our theory of change, and this is where we are, this is where we stand, this is what we have to up to this date. But our questions at this point are kind of like, how can we make this operational? And I would say, go back, our first question, are we on the right track? Is this kind of like the way to develop biocultural conservation? And the second question, how do we make this operational on the ground so that kind of like, for example, academia and the grassroots that are living in those territories, and NGOs and the governments, that they can actually use this and have that as a guidance. So we want to kind of like really now to go into the depth of how to do this and how to make this work, right? And this is where this small grant, small award that we got from Moore now comes in, okay? And could you please change past to the next slide? And this is kind of like where we have now this small grant that we envision to work on and have some deliverables until May, June. And we have 3 specific deliverables and products, as you see here, kind of like in 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to go a little bit into those. First, we want to develop a more in-depth revision of the concept and the theory of biocultural conservation, kind of like the way that we are envisioning it right now, but we know that it's not enough. And especially kind of like to effective management of the lands in the Amazon. We know as well that there are other closed discourses related. For example, I can mention social biodiversity, bioeconomy by itself, kind of like those concepts, right? And we would love to hear more right now in during this time that we are here with you, what other kind of like topics that would you relate with biocultural conservation. Then our second deliverable is how to advance toward more effective implementation of this agenda and kind of like by knowing, by learning and getting kind of into the lessons learned from best practices that already exist on the ground, that are on the ground already, and kind of learn from them their successful approaches. What are the needs? What are the gaps as well? So this kind of like is kind of like another product that we have to deliver, and I think they're all kind of like very useful to point number 3, ultimately kind of like what is the role of academia? How can we assess the role of academia, and specifically in supporting these communities, in supporting NGOs, other academic partners in applying biocultural conservation approaches, assessing their needs, for example, more training, for specific training, specific capacity building, and specific research. So, and this is kind of like where we want to as well talk with you and reflect with you the role of, for example, TCD, the program itself, and because all these 3 deliverables should kind of like put us in a good situation, a good spot to actually dream of GIA 2.0. And next slide, please. And so what are our products? We have formed a working group, an excellent working group a couple of weeks ago when the semester started, to specifically brainstorm kind of like these concepts, no, and have our first deliverables. And one of our deliverables is going to be produced in form of co-authored articles, which will include appropriate literature reviews and methods, results, and discussion. And as well, once we have kind of like worked on this, but I think we already have something advanced that we produced with the partners in last year. So we expect to launch a draft of the paper, and I think we are an online hybrid dialogue event, I would say, with a set of partners, and invite us for their feedback. And the feedback contribution should as well refine the paper and contribute toward deliverables, the number 2 that I just explained, and as well this kind of like guideline of best exemplary cases, especially to show kind of like this operationalization, right, of this successful implementation of biocultural conservation on the ground and the lessons learned, which is ultimately the how that we want to know and give kind of like good advice and have kind of like a sort of blueprint of a paper and document, right? Who are going to be the audience? Of course, we're targeting these products toward academia, right? Then as well, NGOs, funding agencies, our partners on the ground, grassroots, and we would like to disseminate as well these, I see that kind of like we're talking here already about the deliverables, but we would like to disseminate as well this through maybe other venues, social media, and as well Mongabase, for example, or Open Eds publications. And how do we want to be doing this kind of like the practical guidelines? And we have a structure, as you see here in the slides. We have a structure based in the theory of change that we explained and that we just presented. We would like to collect data on these best practices and through the successful approaches, needs and opportunities, successful collaboration, right, partnerships, and kind of like related to the themes that are mentioned here, listed here, right, governance and beyond the territory, and socio-bioeconomy within the territory. And then we have kind of like these other topics that are kind of like related to the governance and social bioeconomy, which is leadership, organization capacities, communication, gender, education, and financial resources. Of course, we are open to edit, to modify this list as we go, as we learn and reflect this semester. And the next slide, please. Then, of course, the delivery 3, which is, I would say, the most important in terms of kind of like this group right now, that is part here, is the role of academia. And we really would like to engage a discussion, in especially a more in-depth discussion on principles and best practices for research capacity building and improved education and partnerships. And because this is kind of like, in our case, a future role of TCD and universities, no, and UF, no? Where do we stand as a program in terms of TCD, and where are we going? What can we do in terms of kind of like learn kind of like from these exemplary cases and apply that and kind of like maybe modify our role? Or do we need to do that? Or what can we do in order to be more engaged? Or what should we do, for example, in a hopefully most probably GIA 2.0? What is specifically kind of like the role of UF in this case? So, and this is kind of like a discussion that it's gonna be ongoing, of course. And I want to make as well a special mention to the topic of, as you see here, kind of like in highlighted in yellow, Amazon universities, or kind of like within the concept of intercultural education, and how this opportunity of having Amazon universities with our partners that we know and that we have been working already, how that would contribute to a more successful implementation of biocultural conservation, no? And we have already some examples, some very great examples that we know in University in Quintana Roo in Mexico, the Inga Group project in Colombia, a SHUAR experience in Ecuador, and I know of a Shipibo experience in Peru. So the principles of these intercultural education may also be relevant, I would say, to mainstream universities who want to kind of know more about how to better successfully engage with communities, learn with them, according to mutual respect, or in engaging and learning from these diverse knowledge systems. And so it seems that this is kind of relevant for all academia, regardless if it's intercultural education. So we're kind of like thinking maybe convening a webinar on this topic as well later in the semester, specifically on the Amazonian University. So stay tuned for that. Now I'm going to be going into the next steps, but as well opening up the floor for a more interactive discussion with you guys. We have organized a Jamboard where I have kind of like pages, 3 pages on keywords for biocultural conservation, bioculture, exemplary cases, and guidelines for the role of academia. And we would like your input, ask for your input, if you could take some time. I'm going to share the link as well in Zoom so that you can access that. And just give us your input for the next maybe 10 minutes, if you can access that, and kind of like add some sticky notes of what do you think about other topics or themes or approaches, concepts on biocultural conservation. Do you know of any exemplary cases that are already happening on the ground? Can you give us some names so that we can kind of like learn from them and maybe include them in our study? And what do you think, and kind of like considering all this discussion on bioculture and conservation, how can universities, how can they help? What should be their role kind of like in implementing these cases on, and as well looking into the future, what should be the role of academia? So I don't know if we can exactly, there is already the, and I'm going to be adding the same on in the chat so that you can do kind of like add your input, and then we can come back maybe in a couple of minutes. And in case you don't have any laptop with you or any phone, that is fine too. Maybe you can give us that information and we can add it for you. So, so I'm kind of like opening up now the discussion which is going to be very useful for us, and I think as well for the group in a couple of minutes to continue that. We're going to continue collecting data. We want to as well send questionnaires to our previous partners, to new partners, suggested partners, as well academic partners in the Amazon region, and have some kind of like close interviews with them, short interviews only, kind of like to get their ideas. And then of course we would like to have this a dialogue, maybe organize a dialogue in the next weeks, months, to get their feedback on this, kind of like have something similar what we did today, kind of like, but with partners as well, and get their feedback of what would they suggest if we want maybe somebody, an NGO representative, a community representative, a financial institution, what do they see as kind of like the role of academia, and what can we learn from best practices that already exist on the ground, and so that we can kind of like really have a document at the end that involves kind of like all the practices that we know, and what the lessons are, and how we can kind of like project ourselves as well in terms of a future role of TCD and UF in terms of helping kind of like NGOs and organizations and community partners implement biocultural conservation, and of course have a better understanding. I think we have to start as well with them and the good understanding and different understanding of biocultural conservation, and be on the same page in that regard. So we're gonna continue working with them, working groups, and we invite any feedback as well from whoever is present here today. And I think we should send out maybe an email with this. We may kind of like refine the Jamboard, or even have some other type of questionnaires, and kind of like provide, if you kind of provide your feedback as well, if you have some cases that we can kind of like look into as well, or even if we can contact somebody of your cases that you know, so everything is going to be helpful. So that's kind of like basically our next cases, our next steps in kind of like refining all these methodologies, design, and hopefully have some very good document by May, June. I don't know if you want to add something, Sinomar and Bob.
Say, we didn't talk today about the exemplary cases, but that's also kind of raw material for us thinking about this. And so we have formed a working group. There's a few people here that are in the working group. It's really diverse and really interesting. And I think through the working group, we also have a form of outreach to different partners or different cases. So people are bringing in experiences from Honduras or Venezuela. We can kind of build on what is being learned in those experiences during the semester, and then build that into our understanding. So we have this working group meeting, and we have the three of us are here, eager to get your input or participation. But we are meeting every other Thursday at 3:30, not this Thursday, the following week, February 8th, will be our next meeting in Ziegler 376. And you don't have to participate in everything. I mean, if we form a subgroup on strategic communications, folks might want to participate only in that, or only on education, capacity